Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here, and this is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. I made a video a little while ago about building your commander collection with 100 budget staples. The whole thing is coming in at now over $25 from when I first recorded the video and then when I did a little bit more. So right now we're at $26, which is bound to happen a little bit with these cards. One thing though is that a lot of these cards are from modern sets, and so they've been opened a ton. When you get a really old card and there becomes some interest in it, the supply dries up really quickly. But if we go down here and look at a lot of these cards, they're all new frame cards. They're reprinted in Commander sets, in Modern Horizons, in big sets. If there is a card on here that is older, then that might be one that dries up in supply a little bit, but hopefully all of these cards are so cheap they can absorb some of the increased interest in them. This video right now, I'm going to be talking about the black, the red, and the green cards, the JUND cards of this set. And this is a long form video where I'm just here chatting with you. And if I make mistakes or if I get confused, well, I'm not really editing them out. But it is nice because you can get sort of my honest opinion about things, and we can kind of break them down and see what the thought process is. The original video, I talked about each card for like 10 seconds or something like that. So it doesn't really give you enough time to really process it and understand why I like a certain card, or in many cases, their shortcomings, because there is a reason why these cards are 10 cents. It's because they're not as good as some of their counterparts, which are $5 or $6. And so understanding where your limitations are can help you understand Commander better, but also can help you understand why you might not need the more expensive card, or why you decide, oh, do you know what? This more expensive card is worth the $5 for my specific deck. All right. Like a lot of long form videos that I make, I'm going to make sure that this is consumable audio as well. So I'm going to read all the cards out as well, because this is going to be a long one. My Azorius video lasted an hour and like 45 minutes. So this one I'm going to try to move a little bit quickly through the cards so that it's not too long, but also I want to give enough time to each one of these cards. So we're starting off in black, and the first one is going to be Isareth the Awakener. Isareth the Awakener is 1 black for a legendary 3/3 with Death Touch. Whenever Isareth the Awakener attacks, you may pay X. When you do, return target creature card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Okay. So number one, this is actually a pretty good body, pretty aggressive as well. In any creature-based deck, you have a 3 mana, 3/3 with Death Touch. So it actually attacks better than you might think. It can kind of run over mana dorks and other sort of utility creatures. But when someone has something big and relevant, then they're going to have to trade it away to answer Isareth. Also, one thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot fewer decks out there that really have a board presence quickly. You know, early game, they're putting out mana rocks, they're ramping, they're not really playing with mid-range creatures. And so Isareth is less likely to run into a 4/4 the turn she comes into play. All right, really, we're not talking about 3 mana 3/3s on this channel. We're talking about this activated ability. Whenever it attacks. So first off, it means that you don't have to actually connect or deal combat damage. That's a good thing. But it does have to attack, which means you're putting Isareth in danger. You can pay X. You're basically casting the spell again from your graveyard. Okay, that's like drawing a card, essentially. This is kind of like when you attack, if you have all the right conditions met, you get to draw a card. You know, that's very good if you would normally be casting things from your graveyard. So there does need to be some graveyard synergies. This creature you need to activate this ability if you want Isareth to be powerful in your deck. I do like that it's colorless mana, so you can tap like a Soul Ring or tap some complicated, just throw some artifact mana in there, even if there's some complicated color requirements in your graveyard. Ultimately, you just have to activate this once and it's value. A 3 mana, 3/3 death touch that essentially lets you flash back a creature is good. That is a good card. I would love to have that card in my deck. It becomes problematic when your deck isn't built to take advantage of this. There are no creatures in your graveyard. It's just a 3 mana 3/3. You know what I mean? Maybe it's blanked by some other irrelevant creature across the battlefield. So, but in most situations, I think that Issereth is quite strong. Okay. Moving on to the next card, we have Loyal Subordinate. Loyal Subordinate is 2 and a black for a 3/1 zombie with Menace and Lieutenant. That means that if you have your commander at the beginning of combat on your turn, each opponent loses 3 life. So this is, if you have your commander, an unblockable 3/3. Not even unblockable. This will just deal 3 damage to each one of your opponents. This is just, if this was just an enchantment that was on the battlefield and did 9 damage every turn, just 3 to each opponent, that would be very good. You would play that in aggressive decks. You'd play that in some random decks. So if you can reliably have your commander on the battlefield, Loyal Subordinate just beats down. It's very good. But also, you're going to be able to get in for damage as well. Menace is a real thing. Your opponents aren't going to be able to keep enough creatures on the battlefield to deal with Loyal Subordinate, and it does so much damage on its own. This is just a pure damage card. Now, there are pretty few decks that might want this effect. I'm thinking Mogus, God of Slaughter would be a good one. It gets creatures off the board and is really resilient on the battlefield, comes down pretty early. I think that aggressive partner commanders could definitely use this card. I'm thinking Tymna the Weaver, because Tymna the Weaver wants to be on the battlefield. It wants low to the ground creatures. It wants evasive creatures so you can get that trigger. And it will be pressuring your opponents, so it wants some advantage. I would even put this in like a low to the ground Karlov deck or anything really. I was thinking about sort of a blue-black tempo deck that I really like. Maybe, oh man, Sig River Cutthroat. Yeah, hang on. Let me pull up Sig, because Sig is a particularly good one. I bet you this is a top card in Sig. Sig River Cutthroat is a hybrid blue-black for a legendary Merfolk Rogue. And at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, you may draw a card. Yeah, so what Sig is, it's a really aggressive deck that you're just constantly trying to get 3 damage in. And I think that this feels like a good fit for Sig. I mean, obviously it's a good fit for Sig. It's great, but I think that it goes in a lot of other decks. This is not this just niche. It's niche aggressive, not niche Sig River Cutthroat. Okay, Plaguecrafter. Plaguecrafter is the next in a long line of this effect, like Merciless Executioner. Again, pretty cheap at 49 cents. I think that the only difference, well, the real difference is that it's a warrior subtype. For Fleshbag Marauder is the same thing, but it's zombie. Merciless Executioner is 2 and a black for a 3/1 Orc Warrior. When Merciless Executioner enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Great. But then we go back to Plaguecrafter, and there's some depth to it. Same mana cost, Human Shaman, 3/2. Picked up a toughness there. Only bad if you have a Skull Clamp on the battlefield. When Plaguecrafter enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Okay, so immediately now you're taxing planeswalkers too, which is great because you are gonna, oftentimes going after a planeswalker is not a bad thing. Very rarely does someone say like, oh sweet, I get to save my awesome creature by sacrificing this irrelevant planeswalker. You know, there will be times though when someone has, you know, a stupid planeswalker on the battlefield and they're Atraxa, and you'd much rather the Atraxa die, but they're going to sacrifice a planeswalker instead. But for the most part, this is a powerful effect to add planeswalker on there. Then each player who can't discards a card. Okay. So one thing I really like about Plaguecrafter is that it really hits multiple levels. It's just very, very good. And this Edict effect is pretty strong as well. The fact that it's on a creature means that you can do stuff like get it back with Issereth. Like, Yeah, getting it back with Isareth is great. Get it back with Mirren of Clan Neltoth or any of these other graveyard shenanigans. It sends creatures to the graveyard and lets you get them back. It's just very good and really belongs in, it really does belong in a lot of black decks. And so it's great to call this a staple. Moving on, even though this is a 3-color card, I'm going to talk about Brutal Horde Chief right now because he's my boy. Brutal Horde Chief is 3 in a black for a 3/3 Orc Warrior. Whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Okay, that's already, there's another line of text down there, but this is already good. I want to break it up into 2 parts and talk about this. 4 mana 3/3, fine. But essentially this gives you an unblockable anthem element to your team. This is perfect in go wide strategies where you can just swing your team and then suddenly you're instantly nuking them for a bunch of damage. This is just amazing. You're going to realize that this Hell Rider type effect ends up being very good because it is very difficult to deal with. Now, what makes this card amazing and really pushes it over the top, that makes it worth one of the most expensive cards on this list at 47 cents. It was not 47 cents. It was not 47 cents when I added it, but it was one of the more expensive cards, is this activated ability. 3 Hybrid Boros, creatures or opponents control block this turn if able, and you choose how those creatures block. Oh my gosh. This is great. This activate ability is phenomenal. The only downside is that it has to put you in Mardu. Only downside. But you choosing how your creatures block is so crazy. So for example, it's the Master Warcraft text, like on a card. And Master Warcraft, by the way, is very good. Master Warcraft is 2 Hybrid Boros. Cast this spell only before attackers are declared. Fine. You choose which creatures attack this turn. You choose which creatures block this turn and how those creatures block. By the way, this is on its own a very good card. And it is also under 50 cents. It's 47 cents. So this probably should have been in my list as well. But this card can let you really manipulate things in multiplayer. So now you are casting it on an opponent's turn, having them swing out at another opponent and having that other opponent either wipe the board away or not block, set up horrible blocks. So Master Warcraft is very good. If we go back to Brutal Horde Chief, it's a little bit more limited, where creatures your opponents control block this turn if able, and you choose how those creatures block. So you can't really force attacks of your opponents, but it's still very good because this just lets you get damage through. If you swing out with your team with Brutal Horde Chief on the battlefield and you activate it, okay, you've drained your opponent for every creature. You're attacking with a bunch of 1/1s and suddenly you're draining them with each combat. That's amazing. Then you activate this and suddenly you have all of your opponent's creatures blocks. You can set up bad blocks. But more importantly, you have all of your opponent's creatures block, 1 stupid 1/1, and then your Brutal Horde Chief and all your other creatures are just getting in for damage. It's honestly an amazing way to close out a game with combat. It's very, very powerful. So Brutal Horde Chief is awesome. This activated ability is insane. And Master Warcraft is a great way to open up lines of attack, to have one opponent take out another, to basically have a one-sided board wipe if you can line everything up. This is an amazing card as well. So messing around with combat is, and also it's fun. It's political and it's fun and it's interactive. And it's, honestly, it's hard for us to imagine future board states. It's like, because you're right, if there are no creatures on the battlefield, or if people don't have good board presence, or after a board wipe, Master Warcraft is useless. You know, same thing with Brutal Horde Chief. It's not great unless you have a board presence, and maybe if they have a board presence. But it has such a high upside of like literally winning the game that we can't really question its power level. It's amazing. And so some people shy away from swinging cards like this, but I particularly like it a lot. All right, let's move on to my next black creature, which is Massacre Girl. Massacre Girl is 3 black for a legendary creature, human assassin. She is a 4/4 with menace, and when Massacre Girl enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Whenever a creature dies this turn, each creature of the Massacre Girl gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So this is a board wipe on a creature. Now I know this might need a little bit of finagling in order to actually turn into a board wipe. Because if the whole board is filled with 2/2s, they all get -1/-1, and nothing happens, you know? But if you have a 2/2, a 1/1, a 2/2, a 3/3, a 4/4, a 5/5, a 6/6, they're all dying because it's going to move up the chain of -1/-1s as each creature dies. And so I've often played Massacre Girl. I've played Massacre Girl in my Muldrotha lands deck. I play it in, I think, my Bantu deck. Like there's a few decks out there that I play Massacre Girl in, and she has almost always been a one-sided board wipe. Or not a one-sided board wipe, but like a board wipe that doesn't affect her, where I just still have a 4/4 on the battlefield. It's very, very, very good. And I like it a lot. And by the way, to have a black board wipe for 32 cents is really strong, especially having it on a creature where you can pull it back from the graveyard, where you have a body left over after the board wipe, even if it is only a 4/4. When I look at board wipes that use -1/-1 counters, Toxic Deluge is $23, but it is much, much better than Massacre Girl. So it's not a fair comparison. If I'm looking at Black Sun Zenith, this feels like a better comparison. It's still like $4.15 or $5. And this feels like a better comparison because for 5 mana, you're only getting the small creatures. You know what I mean? You're never really getting to the big creatures unless you have big mana or you have some hoops to jump through. That feels similar to Massacre Girl, where you're going to get all the small stuff, but you're not really getting up to the big creatures unless you have a big enough board or you jump through some hoops. And then if I go on to other black board wipes, I want to say that Boom Pile is pretty good, and people don't like... Sorry, I'm talking to you and checking my phone at the same time. It's very insulting. People don't like Boom Pile because it's random, okay? But it's not that random. You're going to be able to flip a coin, and you're going to be able to destroy all non-land permanents. Like, people hate the randomness, but if you embrace the randomness, you could get a really powerful effect. And last time I checked, it was a little bit cheaper. I thought the mystery booster would bring it down a little bit. But $2 for a prime board wipe is not bad, because when we go over here and look at Damnation, it's, geez, $28. Gosh, it's even been reprinted a bunch. Not really reprinted. Amonkhet Invocation is not a reprint. Same thing with Judge Gift Card. Same thing with Player Rewards. Okay, fine. It hasn't actually been reprinted except for Modern Masters 2017. But that's silly. How about Crux of Fate? That's a good one. And it's under $2. But still, this is a 5 mana board wipe. That's still like $2. That's expensive. All right. Let's take a look at maybe a couple other. Let's see. Decree of Pain doesn't really fill the same role because it's 8 mana. But again, $4. Like these prices are 10 times more. Extinguish All Hope. 30 cents. There we go. We start getting budget when we start getting up into the 6 mana board wipes. Destroy all non-enchantment creatures. I don't know if that's good anymore. Unless you're running enchantment creatures. Is that a good thing anymore? Life's Finale used to be one of my favorite board wipes. This is a 6 mana board wipe that destroys all creatures, but then you get to like go and search up some of their creatures and put it in their library, or from their library into their graveyard. I like this when you have reanimation effects. So if you are running a reanimator deck and you have cards like Reanimate, which by the way is not cheap. Yeah. $8 for the cheapest Reanimate, then I actually think that Life's Finale could be a good, pretty budget board wipe. But you can see here that, you know, there's one more budget board wipe I wanted to point out to you, and that's Phyrexian Scriptures. This is under $1 at 90 cents, and it's a saga. And this actually does feel a little bit like Massacre Girl, because you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and it becomes an artifact creature. Then you destroy all non-artifact creatures. So imagine that. Like, you have a board wipe, and you still have a creature left over from it. That feels like Massacre Girl. I hate that it sits around on the battlefield for one turn. Oh, I hate it. It drives me crazy. Also, the fact that it doesn't hit artifact creatures is sometimes a disaster. Most of the time, it's not bad. Like, you know, they have a Solemn sitting around or some other things. But every so often, you face down an actual like artifact deck, and it's horrible. Okay. Those are blackboard wipes, and so Massacre Girl makes me feel really good. Moving on, we have Sir Conrad the Grim coming in at 27 cents. Sir Conrad the Grim is 3 black for a 5/4 legendary human knight. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. 1 in a black, each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. All right, so Sir Conrad is a pretty good body. 5/4 for 5 is totally fine, but you're going to notice that if anything dies, if there's any incidental damage, it's just going to start draining people like crazy. What this has me thinking of is actually a very expensive card, Bloodchief Ascension. Bloodchief Ascension is a single black enchantment. You need to jump through a few hoops first, so it might not be coming online until turn 5 anyways. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on it. Whenever a card is put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. Okay, so what makes Bloodchief Ascension just insane is that it's any card. So milling them, like a mesmeric orb or something like that, just milling them is just game over. They die so quickly. But you can see how just incidentally, like a board wipe or some mill or some discard could just be weaponized, just be turned into something huge. And Sir Conrad the Grim is kind of a muted effect to that. But we're talking 27 cents here versus $11 for Bloodchief Ascension. And Sir Conrad the Grim has a way to activate it too. 1 in a black. Just mill card. 1 in a black, mill a card. Of course, Sir Conrad the Grim is going to have some combos associated with him. I'm over here on EDH Rec looking at the, top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th most popular black commander. That's pretty neat. Taking out Erebos and Yahenni and Villis and Skittles. Wow. Sir Conrad has moved up. You're going to see that there's a lot of synergy in these cards. Maybe not this right up here, but these high synergy cards of of Dredge and Exchanging Graveyards and Stitcher Supplier, Forever Young, Plague Crafter, love that. Forever Young, by the way, budget card coming in at 25 cents. The exact opposite of Stitcher Supplier, an uncommon that's $5. By the way, Tortured Existence is a pretty good budget card as well. It's an enchantment for just 1. Choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So you could just pay a black and just switchy them around and trigger Conrad. It's pretty good. But anyways, you can see that this is actually a good commander as well, but goes in any deck. You board wipe, people die. You mess with their graveyard, you mill them, people die. It's just a great way of weaponizing and attacking from different ways than just turning your creature sideways. Huge fan. Okay. Let's talk about Kotafed. Soul Hoarder. All right, so this is a big old demon, 6 mana for a 6/6 flyer, and then you just start drawing cards. Now, Kotafed is not unique, and not unique for the price tag either. 26 cents is very good. You can even get a cool promo version. No, it's not that promo version. This is the promo version. That's over $1. This promo version used to be very cheap and it was all over the place. But anyways, 26 cents is great for this card. But it's not unique. If I go over here to your draw outlets, you're going to have some cards that are really, really similar to it. Like Grim Horror Specs. I think this is under $1. I think it's 75 cents. Yeah, 65 cents for Grim Horror Specs. So again, you're hitting 3 CMC for that. And then this one is you control dies. Okay. Non-token creature, you control dies, draw a card. But it's hitting in at 3 mana, so it's definitely a little bit important. Harvester of Souls hits other stuff. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. This is no damage, okay? And this is a little bit over $1. So this is actually a much closer thing when you have Kotafed at 26 cents, and you have Harvester at just over $1. This is a situation where you're hang on, I have to lose a life for this card, and it's a 6 mana 6/6 flyer. I don't have to lose one for this one. It's a 6 mana 5/5 with Death Touch. And so you might actually be waving like these things in your head, like, okay, well, you know, it might not be worth it. Kotafed does say whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into graveyard from the battlefield. That includes things like fetch lands, and honestly, there's so many artifacts and planeswalkers and so many other things that just end up in the graveyard that Kotafed might draw you a lot more cards. It also feels a lot more dangerous. There's other besides Harvester of Souls. There's this lovely Kotafed. I also like that Parasite. Oh, Krov. Is Krov still expensive? You should buy Krov. $2. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Krov and Bantu are some of my favorites, but they're not the same effect, honestly. Those are like one-time cash-in stuff to draw cards. Midnight Reaper and Grim Horsepex, Kotafed, Harvester of Souls, all of those are a little bit different. Okay, Midnight Reaper, a little bit over $1. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, deals 1 damage to you, and you may draw a card. So honestly, I think that Kotafed might be one of the best versions of these and might be one of the cheapest. I like the body. I like that it's evasive. I like that it hits everything. It just might be too much card draw. Is that a thing? Too much card draw? Oh my gosh, I love it. All right, let's talk about Newsgraph Mob. 25 cents for a 6 mana 0/0. Newsgraph Mob is 4 black for a zombie. It is a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a player casts a spell, remove a +1/+1 counter from Newsgraph Mob. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. All right. So basically, this is going to turn into 5 zombies very quickly, in multiplayer especially. You play this for 6, and then suddenly it's like, oh, zombie, Newsgraph Mob is dead. Let's think about it in terms of, like, I'm going to get 5 zombies for 6 mana. That's actually pretty good. 10 power and toughness across 5 bodies for 6 mana. Now, this has some other incidental advantages as well, because once this ends up in your graveyard, like, you can easily cast it again. Black is great at pulling things out of your graveyard, and so if this thing just goes to your graveyard really quickly, then you could just attack in with an Isareth and cast it again from your graveyard. I also like being able to cast this with Alesha because it's a 0/0 in your graveyard. So you just pull it back onto the battlefield, and then suddenly maybe you cast a few spells, pull a couple zombies off before it goes away again. This is just really great. It's also synergizes with +1/+1 counters a lot. I've seen versions of this where you can play it with Doubling Season, so that, yeah, Doubling Season is great. Doubling Season basically doubles +1/+1 counters, and it doubled tokens. And so this will enter the battlefield as with 10 +1/+1 counters on it. And then every time you cast a spell, you'll pull a counter off, and then you'll create 2/2 zombies. I know it's not fair to talk about Doubling Season and how good it is with Newsgraph Mob in a budget video kind of thing, because, oh my gosh, it's back up to above $40. See, don't play Doubling Season. And by the way, like, Primal Vigor used to be like the cheap. I used to be like, don't worry, everyone, play Primal Vigor. Like, it's okay that it's a symmetrical effect. You will use it a lot more than your opponents, but this is going to be $21 for Primal Vigor, which is the fair version of Doubling Season. Anyways, you don't have to have Doubling Season to make Newsgraph Mob amazing. You could just mess around with counters. You know what I mean? Like, you could just find ways to manipulate the game with counters and just have synergies there. And then suddenly, like, it ends up giving you even more value. Even on its own, it's great. I love it. I mean, I compared it to Grave Titan. It's not. Grave Titan is 10 power and 10 toughness as soon as it hits the battlefield. And then when you attack, you just make more. The advantage gets out of control. It's not a fair comparison, but Grave Titan is crazy. I actually think it's pretty close to Army of the Damned, which is another card that I like a lot in terms of budget presence. It's under $1, and it's 8 mana, 2 more mana, to create 13 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. This is an army in a can. It's a single card that you can suddenly turn into I win the game. It also has flashback for 10, so you could theoretically create 26 zombies with a single card. Commander's a game where mana is not as big of an issue. And so I like when you have big army in a can kind of stuff. Another thing on a budget that creates some zombies is Josu Ves, coming in at 50 cents. Okay. Just fine on its own. Josu Ves is 2 black for a 4/5 legendary zombie knight. It's got kicker for 5 and a black. I'll tell you what you get for your kicker in a second, but it has menace. Okay. If you did pay the kicker, it enters the battlefield, you create 8 black zombie knight creature tokens with menace. So for 10 mana, you'll get 8 zombies and a 4/5, all of them having menace. So I also like Josu Ves 2 as this big, like, I'm going to win the game card. It feels very similar to, maybe not Newsgraph Mob. Newsgraph Mob at 6 mana is more of a mid-range, flood the board, be a threat, recurrent kind of thing. But it does feel like some of those other big effects, like, yeah. Okay, let's move on to our other black cards. We have to go down a little bit to get to our next black card, and it's an enchantment. Nope, it's Torgar. I almost forgot Torgar. Torgar is 6 black for a 7/6, but you can make this very cheap if you have some dumb creatures on the battlefield. It'll cost 2 less than you sacrifice those creatures. So I like that. I like sacrificing creatures in order to give yourself some value. Sometimes black wants you to sacrifice creatures, but when it enters the battlefield, it cuts your opponent's life total in half. Basically, their life total becomes half their starting life total rounded down. So in our format, it becomes 20. I misspoke, and in the first video, I said it went to 10 because I'm like equated it in my mind to like Soren Markov. Speaking of which, with Soren Markov, let's go over here. Soren Markov is a planeswalker that can set someone's life total to 10. It's a just very salty card in Commander, but 6 mana, sometimes deal 30 damage is definitely worth it in a lot of different decks. But again, this is like $13. It's a lot to be able to have that effect, especially when people are so salty about it. So Torgar I kind of like because you can cast it for pretty cheap. It doesn't have to be 8. It's still a good body, and it just punches people really hard. Where do I want this card? I mean, I don't want it at the head of a commander deck. I think I kind of want it in a tokens deck, maybe an aristocrats deck where you have just a lot of fodder to sacrifice to be able to play this for, 2 mana. I really like it in aristocrats decks because you want to sacrifice outlet, even though this isn't the best. Like, you don't want a one-time sacrifice outlet, but also you're interested in like pinging people down a little bit at a time. And this does one big ping so that suddenly your opponents are feeling like, whoa, like I'm under way more pressure now. Now your board has an ability to actually nickel and dime me out. I also kind of like this in decks that the damage really matters. So, maybe like big attacky decks or double damage decks or something like that. So I'm thinking about pairing it with red where damage is really heavy, or in a deck where you have wound reflection, where by setting their life total to 20, you could theoretically kill them. Torgar in a card like wound reflection, if their life total was set from 40 to 20, then wound reflection will be like, oh, like that change of life is life loss. You will then take another 20. So wound reflection is another not cheap card. I'm sorry. But it's also a very fun card. $17. At the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to life they lost this turn. But that's kind of where I could see a card like Torgar and big chunks of damage being really good. Also, like I mentioned, paired with red. Okay, let's go on to enchantments in black, and I want to talk about Underworld Connections. This is not a hard comparison because we have cards that are really similar to it in Phyrexian Arena. Phyrexian Arena is the same mana cost. 1 black. Oh, I should read Underworld Connections. My apologies. 1 black for an enchantment aura. You enchant land, and enchanted land has tap, pay 1 life, draw a card. Okay. So Phyrexian Arena is 1 black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Okay, Phyrexian Arena is now above $10. Okay, and that's a lot. It's just a lot of money for this effect, and I don't even know if it's that great. I've gone on record in saying that sometimes quick card drawn black is better than Phyrexian Arena. I can explain that right now, even though you might be thinking to yourself, why, DJ? Why are you explaining this again? Phyrexian Arena is a great card, but it's only really, really valuable if you can land it and it exists on the battlefield for several turns. Because some of my other cards that are coming up are also quite good. So Phyrexian Arena, you play it, it does nothing. Your next turn, you've essentially cast a spell for 1 black where you lose 1 life and draw a card. That's not good. Okay. Then, so we're not at the turn we played it. We're not at the next turn, but the turn after that. Then suddenly we are paying 1 black. And we're paying 2 life and drawing 2 cards. Yeah, that's still not good. Okay. Then we wait a whole nother turn. Okay, so now let me get in the camera. We wait a whole nother turn, and now we're going 1 black for, we're losing 3 life and drawing 3 cards. That is actually quite good. You can compare that to cards like Ambition's Cost, which is 4 mana sorcery, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. So you got a mana off for doing that. Good job. You finally sort of recouped and been happy with approximating Ambition's Cost, which is not a staple by any means. Okay. So that's why I think that Phyrexian Arena might be slow, and some other cards that give you instant access might be better. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Read the Bones. And because that's also on my list. This is 3 mana. Scry 2, draw 2, lose 2. So this gives you some element of selection, being able to look 2 further cards deep than many of these other spells. It still costs 3, and you're drawing 2 cards. You're really jumping ahead in many situations than Phyrexian Arena. Honestly, it's best to be able to balance your card draw and maybe use both. Just, I don't know if you need Phyrexian Arena in many of these situations. And then also when you have something that's an easy comparison of Underworld Connections, which is 39 cents. Right. So what makes Underworld Connections budget, whereas, what do we got here? Phyrexian Arena, like $10. Well, all it is it's a land. Honestly, it just basically has to be attached to a land. And so it's like, look, you basically have to sacrifice using this land for mana. Ramp is very important in our format. It just is. And the fact that you're sacrificing a land to get this effect means that you are changing from a $10 card to a 40-cent card. But giving up a land for card draw isn't that bad. So I think that Underworld Connections is way worth it at under 40 cents, especially when you're comparing it to above $10. Like, it's crazy. Okay. Let's move on to other black enchantments. We got the Eldest Reborn coming in at 25 cents in the Mystery Booster. The Eldest Reborn is 4 and a black for an enchantment, Saga. Basically, this is going to move at each turn nearing your draw step to different effects. The first effect you get when you cast it is each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Okay, that Edict effect we noticed is not that great because we've seen it on Plaguecrafter to better effect for 3 mana. So what are we getting for this 2 additional mana? Okay, well, it keeps going because the next step is each opponent discards a card. That is card advantage. That is good. By the way, also the Eldest Reborn is each opponent, so you don't have to sacrifice a creature as well. So that sort of not targeted, but like that removal that doesn't impact you might be worth an extra mana. Everyone discards a card. That's worth 1 or 2 mana, for sure. And then finally, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That is very good. We have really strong versions of this coming in at 3 mana or 2 mana, like Animate Dead is a very strong effect that pulls things out of the graveyard. So I'm comparing this to like really sort of strong versions. Animate Dead is 275, you know, for a pretty strong version of this. Necropotence or Necropotence, no. Not necropotence, sorry. Necromancy. Necromancy is another really strong version of this. It's just 3 mana for an enchantment that pulls it out of the graveyard. And then we got a few of them sitting at 4. Right now, 5 is the is kind of the very mediocre rate. Like there's a lot of uncommons. Return creature, battlefield. Return creature battlefield. Has to be black. Let's see what we got here. I think most of them like at uncommon are at 5 mana, and they're not even good in limited. So that kind of stinks. Let's see here. Diabolic Servitude is a solid one at 4 mana. Let's find one at like Ever After does 2 creatures at 6 mana. Let's try to find some of those mediocre 5 casting cost ones that I was thinking about. And the reason why I can't think of them is honestly, they're not really worth playing. Like there have been a few of them that have come up, like Return to the Underworld. That's a weird one. That's 5 mana is an uncommon. Let's see here. Unbarrow Rights at 5 mana, needs to be in 2 colors. Victimize is a good, I wonder if Victimize is cheap enough to be on this list. No, $2? Suck. Okay, but Victimize is a really good, even at $2 is a good one. Where's one of the ones that's like Return to the Battlefield? There's one that turned it into a dragon at 5 mana. There was another one that was like Liliana's something. And it was just average too. Dread Return at 4 mana. Okay, I think Dread Return at 4 mana is a really good sort of litmus test. Still, this is a $2 card, you know? Man. So it just really puts into context how really strong the Eldest Reborn is. Fearsome Awakening is the dragon one I was talking about. 16 cents, but honestly, like I don't like that effect. That's not that great. I think that there was one that returned it and made it into a zombie. But I can't remember that well. Oh well. Here we go. Cauldron's Gift was from the most 3 cents. My gosh. But basically, if at least 3 black mana was spent to cast a spell, put the top 4 cards of your library in your graveyard. You may choose a creature card in your graveyard. If you do, return to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So yeah, we have the cheapest of cheap for 5 mana. So we can see that 5 mana just to get a creature back is not an impressive effect. But when you build this card together for a quarter, it's just so good. I also like that it kind of kills itself too. I mean, this has been really solid in enchantment decks, and I'm really just a big fan of the Eldest Reborn. Okay, moving on to one more enchantment. We have Hedonist Trove. This is a 7 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard. You may play land cards exiled with Hedonist Trove. You may cast non-land cards exiled with Hedonist Trove. You can't cast more than 1 spell this way each turn. So this is like a Praetor's Council or something like that for someone else's graveyard. You just get everyone else's graveyard and you're like, okay, you can play lands, just great, okay? But also you can play spells. The problem is that like if you're you have to cast non-land cards and this doesn't change the mana cost. So you have to use their lands in their graveyard to cast their spells, okay? So otherwise, you need to make sure that this is in a deck that can cast other things. Maybe stuff like Felwar Stone, or maybe this goes as a cool, fun top end in a Ascend Triplets deck where you can cast all sorts of other spells. It's also limited to casting a few cards each turn, because here's the thing. If you can cast this for 7 mana, in your next turn, you might want to cast 3 or 4 of your opponent's cards. But when you can only cast 1 each turn, it like feels very limiting. But the thing is that this is still a powerful effect. Let's look at Mnemonic Betrayal, which, by the way, is a very expensive card, or not a very expensive card. It's a very powerful card for only 64 cents. 1 blue-black. Exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, and you can spend mana as though as any other mana. Beginning of next step, if any of those cards remain exiled, return them to their owner's graveyards. Exile Mnemonic Betrayal. So this is a Yawgmoth's Will for your opponent's graveyards. And that can be powerful, especially because this bends the color requirements so you don't have to have just the right colored mana. But you have to use it that turn. And so this crimps your mana in a different way. Like, you know, what are you going to actually be casting if you have to pay 3 and then use the cards right then? You also can't play your opponent's lands. And so I'm wondering if the long-term value of playing lands and then casting one spell a turn off of Hedonist Trove might be better than the one-off version of Mnemonic Betrayal. Of course, this also means that you're messing around with your opponent's stuff. And that means that this won't necessarily synergize with your own deck. And it's a little bit of an unknown, so you can't really plan for them to have a combo piece or them to have exactly what you want in their graveyard, whereas you can plan for your own. But let's just compare this to Yawgmoth's Will. Yawgmoth's Will is a crazy powerful effect, okay? This basically says it's 3 mana until the end of your turn. You may play cards from your graveyard. And then if it were to go back into your graveyard, it gets exiled. Okay. So we're talking about not legal versions, gold bordered versions for $25. And the original one is $70. This is I'm sorry, it's covering up my picture, but this is a $70 card. Yeah. So Yawgmoth's Will is a $70 card. And then you compare it to things that hit on the other graveyard. And you're talking about, like, come on. Yawgmoth's Will is $70 and Mnemonic Betrayal is 70 cents. Yeah. You know, Hedonist Trove, 13 cents. This is just so cheap. I know that it's a lot. You know what I mean? I was complaining about Phyrexian Arena and saying, look, is Phyrexian Arena that good, that ubiquitous when, you know, you're drawing a card at the beginning of each turn and it's so slow? Hedonist Trove has to be even slower. You know, 7 mana, hit someone's graveyard. You only get 1 spell a turn. You know, you can maybe play some lands if they have lands from there. It's rough, you know, but it's such a big splashy effect that I think that it's really important that we look at it. I want to look at what I think is that's not going to return the things maybe it will return the things I want. Praetor's. It's not Praetor's Council. Praetor's? It is Praetor's Council. I just spelled council wrong. Okay. Praetor's Council, I feel, is not exactly. Praetor's Council is better, but I feel like it's maybe a little bit similar. Praetor's Council is 8 mana. Return all cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Praetor's Council. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So it's like the no maximum hand size kind of makes sense too. Hedonist Trove is 1 cheaper, but it definitely is limiting and hits someone else. But Praetor's Council has been reprinted a bunch of times and is about $3. $2.80. So I'm wondering if like this effect is similar enough and if 13 cents is just good. All right, let's go on to some other big splash. Nope, we're not going on to big splashy black cards. We're going on to simple black cards. Ransack the Lab. 11 cents out of Modern Masters. Ransack the Lab is 1 in the black. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of them in your hand, the rest into your graveyard. This is a cantrip in black. You know, this is not Index. Index goes, no, it's not Index. Index is 1 mana. Impulse, sorry. Impulse is in blue. It goes 4 deep. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. Okay. Impulse in an instant speed. Impulse is great in blue. So Impulse measures up in blue decks where you have a lot of draw. That makes me think that Ransack the Lab might measure up in black decks. I know it only goes 3 deep instead of 4. I know it's sorcery speed, but I also think it's really nice that the other ones go into your graveyard because the black can use your graveyard so well. I think this is just a really solid cantrip in black, and the fact that it is even in the same realm as Impulse is great. you know, and that's like a pretty fair comparison. So I like Ransack the Lab a lot. Already mentioned Read the Bones, that this is a really solid card draw, goes pretty deep, lets you get what you want and gives you the cards right away. I think it's just great. And then we have, let's see if this is under 50 cents. It was under 50 cents when I first, yeah, it's under 50 cents again. This is one of the more expensive cards that I added to the list at the time. I think this was 46 cents. And it was the most expensive card on my list. And it's Command the Dread Horde. I'm super glad it's at 44 cents right now. 4 black for sorcery. Choose any number of target creatures and/or planeswalkers in graveyards. And then Command the Dread Horde deals damage to you to their total converted mana cost. And you just put them onto the battlefield under your control. So this is powerful. You just get to pay 6 mana and get whatever you want out of any graveyard and just put it onto the battlefield. Let's compare this to, let's go over here. Let's compare this to something like Living Death, which feels really similar, right? Like Living Death is a $3 card, very powerful. You exile all cards, then you put your graveyards onto the battlefield. It's like switch your graveyards and your battlefield. But Living Death has some hoops you need to jump through. It's a little bit different. Command the Dread Horde just lets you get whatever you want and puts it onto the battlefield. I mean, even if we're comparing it to cards like Victimize that I mentioned before with Reanimator effects. Victimize? I'm pretty sure I spelled it exactly the same way I did before. Victimize? Oh my gosh, this is... Oh, I did it right. I did it right the first time. Okay. Victimize is $2. And you have to sacrifice a creature and you get 2 back. You know, Ever After. I mentioned this one before. 6 CMC, you know, get 2 cards back. Okay. This is 6 CMC and you can get whatever you want from any graveyard. This is just your graveyard. It's just so good. So good. And so oftentimes we talked about reanimation effects, that 5 was blah, you know, 4, like Dread Return, was like, okay, you get a creature back for 4. That's solid. 3 seems to be like pretty good. 2 is top tier and 1 for reanimate is insane. Okay. This, and by the way, the prices on points on all of those are all over the place. This being under 50 cents and letting you get multiple things back however you want, despite the life loss, is crazy good. This is a Commander staple. I don't know why. It's a Commander staple. Go get it right now. Okay. And then finally we have Ghastly Conscription. This is another like big splashy effect. And remember I mentioned before that usually big splashy game ending effects are expensive, you know? And so whenever I can find a budget one for 21 cents, I kind of want to pay attention to it because it could be that finisher that many of you budget players are looking for. And no, this is not as stapley as Command the Dread Horde or Ransack the Lab or Read the Bones or Underworld Connection. Those are very much more staple cards. Throw it in any deck. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of these could belong in any deck, like Plague Crafter and stuff like that. But whenever you have something that's really like top end that could finish out a game, and you might not have that in your repertoire, I think it's important to call it out. Okay, Ghastly, I should read the card. Ghastly Conscription is 5 black for a sorcery. Exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard in a face-down pile. Shuffle that pile, then manifest those cards. Okay. So if you've happened to mill your opponents a lot, or if there's a lot of creatures in your opponent's graveyard, then you just get to take all of them and turn them into 2/2s and they're manifests. So you can flip them up. That's pretty good, right? It's like 7 mana for, I mean, how many creature cards could they have in the graveyard? 5, 6, 7? Easily. You know, 7 mana for 7 2/2s, some of which you might be able to flip up for value. Yeah. But you can even use this on your own creatures. And if you are self-milling, if you're a deck that ends up putting cards in the graveyard, if you're a Sir Conrad deck or something like that, you can pay 7 mana and get 10 or 15 or 20 different creatures, different 2/2s on the battlefield, and then be flipping them up all over the place for value. Like this could be that big spell that just goes from I have no board to I have a huge board. almost like Command the Dread Horde or Army of the Damned or Vosu Jess, Josu Ves. There we go. And the Army in the Can type cards. And black's pretty good at that. Just like, I have no board and then suddenly I have this huge army. And that's great because we can get up to that mana. We have the ability to control the board. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of Ghastly Conscription, and I've seen it play out really well. So this is a good include. And 21 cents, you can't argue with 21 cents. It's crazy. All right, that is black. We're going to move on to red and then green in this video, but I'm going to take a break right now. See you in a second. All right, everyone, I'm back from my little break, and I want to talk about red cards in my Build Your Commander collection, full of Commander budget staples for $26.04. Doesn't have that ring to it that the other one did. Let's take a look at Guttersnipe as we go into these red cards. Guttersnipe coming in at 8 cents. Yes. Okay, but by the way, there's also a really good online, this online promo. No, this promo is $1. I really like this promo. It's very cool. Oh, it's not even showing up for you. There you go. We're going to look at this promo, even though it's $1. Guttersnipe is 2 in a red. I like how I'm putting up promos for those audio people. It's the full art one that you can get from like Game Day or something like that. It's very nice. Guttersnipe is 2 in a red for a 2/2. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Guttersnipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. But DJ, what if I'm not running a Spellslinger deck? This feels too narrow. Doesn't matter. Guttersnipe is still good. Just imagine a 2/2 creature that could do 6 damage. Wait, that's like one spell in multiplayer. One spell, it just suddenly just spreads 6 damage out there. What if you cast 2 spells or 3 spells? Okay, you don't have to chain everything together to make Guttersnipe good. And by the way, you still can play a bunch of spells. Red is gonna rely on a lot of impulse draw, and it's gonna need some support, you know, because a lot of red creatures are aggressive, and red oftentimes has a lot of different sort of looting effects or filtering effects to go in their deck, and Guttersnipe will naturally slot into them. You're going to see some instants and sorceries in this list, you know, like Thrill of Possibility, that just belongs in a lot of red decks. And so Guttersnipe can say, look, you know, I'm going to punish you for just me making my deck work. In order for me to make my deck work, I got to filter some cards. I got to spin my wheels a little bit. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing a bunch of damage. And so you don't need to have a deck built around Guttersnipe to have it be really solid. A big fan. Okay. Moving on to Cranko Tin Street Kingpin, coming in at a little bit expensive, 41 cents, but the Cranko is amazing. The Cranko Tin Street Kingpin is 2 in a red for a 1/2 legendary creature goblin. Whenever Cranko Tin Street Kingpin attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to Cranko's power. So things I like about Cranko is that it creates goblins based on its power. So it plays really well and scales well with a lot of cards like Commander. So equipment or pump effects or anthems or anything like that has you yielding more and more goblins. But the first thing that this does is it comes in as a 2/3 and creates 2 goblins when it attacks. Let's think about the things that can create goblins. How about Goblin Rabble Master? Okay. This is a great card. It creates, I typed in Goblin and expected to be able to quickly get Goblin Rabble Master. There's 197 Goblin things named Goblin. My gosh, Goblin Rabs. Okay. Goblin Rabble Master. Okay. Other Goblin creatures you control attack each turn of Fable. You want to be attacking, but that could be a liability. But basically it's a 2/2 for 3, and you create a Goblin every turn, and then Goblin Rabble Master can get big. But we're talking about $8. $9. That's expensive. Let's take a look at like Handware Garrison. Not goblins, but definitely up. How do I spell? Let's take a look at Handware Garrison. This is going to create 2 duders, humans, when it attacks. When it attacks, create 2 1/1 red human creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. Okay, so suddenly we have something very similar. 3 CMC. Attacks as a 2/3 and creates 2 dudes. This is $2. So this is way more expensive than cranko, but then doesn't really do anything after that. Cranko is going to then become a 3/4 and create 3 goblins, then a 4/5 and create 4 goblins. You can augment it in all sorts of ways. There's a growing potential to cranko. Handware does have some growing potential. That's when it turns into, let's see if I can click on it, Handware the Rising Township. So there is a good reason to include Handware Garrison in your deck, because you could make a 7/4 ridiculous thing when you combine it with Handware Battlements, right here. So there is definitely a reason to include these, and I think that that's a really solid budget card. But I mean, come on, cranko is definitely like doing work for its price point. Let's look at the better version of cranko before we move on. Because oftentimes, you just compare against something else. You compare against the other cranko. And that's not a fair comparison, because number one, it's 460, but also it's just way better. 4 mana, 3/3, just double the goblins that you have. Create a number of 1/1s equal to the number of goblins you have. He gets exponentially out of control. You have a couple goblins, you tap him, he gets even more. Doesn't even have to attack. So this cranko is it is better than the other one. But you don't have to compare them. People oftentimes think oh, well, I'll just play this cranko instead. No, play them both. This oftentimes doesn't need to be in his own deck. You could just throw this in a token deck, a Torbrand deck, a +1/+1 counters deck, a Power Matters deck, an equipment deck, anything. Cranko is going to give you a ton of value. Dude, combine him with Brutal Horde Chief. Make a brutal deck with those. Okay, moving on, we have the card that started it all. Tectonic Giant. Tectonic Giant has grown in value a little bit, but 34 cents is still amazing. And then why is this one 74 cents? Theros Beyond Death. The extended art is only 74 cents? Is that true? Okay, this might be a little bit of a thing. Oh my gosh, you can buy the extended art good looking version for 74 cents? That's amazing. Go buy this card. This is great. Okay, 34 cents. Tectonic Giant. 2 red for a creature. Elemental Giant. Doesn't die to cast off or whatever. Let's do Giant Tribal. That sounds like a fun deck. Okay. When Tectonic Giant attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, choose one. Deals 3 damage to each opponent. Ouch! Each opponent. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Okay, 4 mana for a 3/4, and it could just attack and then suddenly deal 9 damage on its own. Remember how much I was gushing about Loyal Subordinate and how this sort of damage that just automatically gets through is really good? Yeah, same thing with Tectonic Giant. Just 3 damage, spread all over the place. Suddenly everyone's taking 3. This is great in Torbrand. It's great in Nehebs, where damage really matters. It's great in any aggressive deck. It's great in the new Giants Tribal deck that I'm going to be making, because that's the thing. Morophon Giants, we'll think about it. Okay. That has me able to play all of the Titans if I play 5 colors, so that seems good. Okay. But hang on. Red just doing extra damage is not impressive. Red does that all the time. But this ability to get real card draw and lasting card draw off of a creature is not something to scoff at. Okay, you just attack, or it becomes targeted, exile the top 2. You know what I mean? You choose one of those, so you get some card selection and you can play it. That means you can play lands. That means you can plan out your next turn, because it's not just gone. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So you can kind of lock in your land drop for your next turn. You know what I mean? And if you don't have a land drop now, you could play it immediately. You could just sort of plan out your turns. And do you know what? If there's nothing there, it's fine. It's not even a big deal. It's just free. You know what I mean? This isn't even it's on a spell or anything like that. It's on a 3/4 body. It's so good. Literally every turn we can try to get damage through with this guy and just draw cards, deal damage, exactly what you want in red. I love Tectonic Giant, and it's just targeted too. Like if someone kills it, they're like, oh, this is getting you too much value. Kill it. And you're like, all right, deal 3 to all of you. I just dealt 9 damage for you killing it. That's crazy, right? Oh my gosh. Someone goes to like Doomblade it, and then you just deal a bunch of damage or draw a card. All right, Wildfire Devils is 25 cents out of Commander 2019. Wildfire Devils is 3 in a red for a 4/2 Devil. When Wildfire Devils enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a player at random. That player exiles an instant or sorcery card from their graveyard. Copy that card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. All right, this is a fun one, and it's 25 cents. I'm so glad that I'm here telling you how great this card is. So, first off, you can put this in Rakdos Showstopper, because Rakdos Showstopper won't kill devils. We always look for devils, creature type. But really, this enters the battlefield, and the thing that makes people so anxious is the fact that it's like, oh, you have to choose a player at random. And that's true. You know, you choose a player at random, and they might not have anything in their graveyard that's an instant or sorcery. That can totally happen. Okay, but the thing is that oftentimes people do. And what's the worst card? What's the worst instant or sorcery card? Pick up a deck around you. I'm gonna just go pick up a deck. And I'm gonna find the worst instant and sorcery card in here. You know, this is the worst card in here. Okay. So this is a Planeswalker deck. Like it's a Will and Rowan, like Planeswalker deck. So not a lot of instants and sorceries. I think that my worst instant and sorcery is Contentious Plan. Just draw a card, proliferate. That's fine. You know, I'm looking at this deck, like this deck over here, and my worst instant or sorcery is like a Farseek. That's fine. A Cultivate, a Kadama's Reach, that's great. The only places that you really whiff, I feel, is with counter magic. Okay? Because what happens is you pick someone at random and you're like, great, I picked the blue player. And they're like, sweet, I'll exile this counter spell. Sucks to be you. But here's the thing, they can only do that for so long. Eventually, you're going to choose them again and they're going to be like, ugh, okay, fine, you get to cast my Fact or Fiction. Yes! Yes! Okay, and you can help feed this too with what's in your own graveyard. Okay, it's random and people hate random, but it's kind of fun to embrace some randomness, and this can be very good. It's just going to keep getting value over and over and over again. And yeah, I know that value is random, but like you're going to be surprised at the amount of card advantage this silly little 4/2 gives you. It's a 4 mana 4/2. This also attacks really well too. I mean, come on. Just smash in for some damage? Yes! Okay, I got worked up over Wildfire Devils, I'm sorry. But people really shy away from randomness, and you can... Okay, when you're playing competitive Magic, and if you are playing competitive, you do want to shy away from randomness, you know, from... you want to make sure that your draws and everything is super duper predictable, because the professional Magic players, they rely on their own skill in order to get through. And so they want to reduce the variance. They want 4 of each copy. They want to plan everything out. They certainly do not want to roll dice for their wins, because they want every edge to be gained in their own play skill. Commander's completely different than that. We're not playing a competitive format. And if you're playing on a budget, or if you have a weaker deck, or, you know, if you are not a pro, you want randomness in your life, because randomness can make up the difference between, you know, your $50 budget deck and their $1,000 tuned deck. And that's the great thing about Magic, is that if you run hot, like if things work out for you, you have good draws, you play tight, then you can take down anyone. All right. And so I really feel like you need to embrace some variance, embrace some randomness in your card choices, and And that might actually be a way you have way more fun and the way you pick up wins against other people. Okay, rant over. Next red card. Next red card is Warmonger Hellkite. This is 37 cents, and Warmonger Hellkite is 4 red for a 5/5 dragon with flying. All creatures attack each combat fable. This also scares people. They're like, wait a second, what if I don't want to be attacked? Okay, we'll get to that. 1 and a red, attacking creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn. Wow, that's an anthem. That is an anthem right there. Just 2 mana and all your creatures, like attacky creatures. This is also, like, if we look at Perforos, you know, this is also, like, better than the activated ability on Perforos, a $25 card that just got reprinted. You know what I mean? And twice. Just got reprinted twice, still sitting at $25. I know that the other effect on Perforos is very good, but come on, like, that anthem is still really strong, and we've got a better version on our 37-cent card. Like, if we look at Orcish, it's not going to be Orcish. It's going to be Goblin. Oh, I did this before. Goblin has a 197 cards. Flame? Nope. Hang on. We're going to find this. It's a red. It's an enchantment. It's not an enchantment. It's an enchantment. It says +1/+0. That's good enough. 29 cards. Apparently it's not that good enough. Let's find it. Here we go. Goblin Oriflame. I was right. Goblin Oriflame, and Orcish Oriflame is the other one right over here. So this is 2 mana for an enchantment. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0. I feel like that is playable. By the way, 4 cents. You know, if you want an aggressive anthem, 4 cents, yeah, that's great. But I feel like, look at that comparison. You just pump, and suddenly you have like this crazy attacking effect. It's so good. Like, one off, like Trumpet Blast. By the way, Trumpet Blast, not like a super, like, commander card, but it's 3 mana for +2/+0. This is 4 mana for +2/+0 on an activated ability. Just so, and the rate of the dragon's not that bad. 6 mana for a 5/5 flyer. That's not that bad at all. Okay, now people see the all creatures attack each combat fable as a downside. It's not a downside. You should have decks built in red where you want to be turning things sideways. This, you will find lines of attack. You know, you have built your deck around this, hopefully. And the fact that you might be sending your opponents at each other is really, really good. You know, decks that might want to play this, you know, are red decks, essentially. Let's look at the red commanders out there, and let's find out which ones would really want you to be attacking. Make a lot of creatures, pump them up and attack. Yes. Make a lot of creatures, pump them up, attack. Make a lot of creatures, pump them up, attack. You know what I mean? Like, look at this attacking. We go down to something like, where is it here? Something like Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, where there's a downside of attacking you. Then suddenly now you've made a lot of sense. You know, where you do want, you know, creatures your opponents control attack each turn to Fable. You know, attack each turn Fable, attack each turn to Fable. There's our Warmonger Hellkite right there. So there's definitely a place for this type of attacking effect. And honestly, I don't think that you need a specific commander to make it good. All right. Let me talk about another card that I think is spectacular, but has not been gaining the traction that I think it should. And it's a 17-cent card out of Commander 2019. It's Tectonic Hellion. Tectonic Hellion is 5 red for a hasty 8/5. That is 7 CMC, that's a lot. But whenever Tectonic Hellion attacks, each player who controls the most lands sacrifices 2 lands. Yes! Yes. This is the thing we need. Now, there are tons of effects out there that can limit your ramping opponents. And yeah, like we don't use them. That's against the social contract. If we go and look at some of the saltiest cards out there, they're going to be cards like that go for mass land destruction or take out certain lands. But this just goes after the one who ramped the most, and it feels so good. Also, it's not messing with the game that much. This comes out at 7 CMC. So basically you're punishing the person who has like 9 or 10 lands and you have 7. They're still in the game. They're still doing totally fine, but it kind of limits their ability to pump up into those big regions, those Eldrazi regions. The big spells, the Craterhoof Behemoths and the Eldrazi and the Expropriates and all this other stuff that you might not have access to. Remember how I said that some of these big spells are sometimes outside of our budget and we're like, oh, I guess I'm playing with the bad version. You know what I mean? But like Tectonic Hellion might keep people away from reaching that Expropriate mana, that Eldrazi mana. I love it. I love it so much. I think it's just fair enough that it's not going to piss people off, but it's still sneakily powerful. Love that it has haste. It's going to be really hard to interact with. I mean, I just really wish it was honestly, what I wish is it was a 5/8 instead of an 8/5. You know, just who cares what it's cracking in for? Just keep attacking and keep sacrificing lands, even if it's yours, you know, even if you're the one that ramped too much. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Wizards, for playing around with this effect of trying to answer the problem of people ramping too much. It is a problem. And we have cards to deal with it, but we don't. We just try and keep up. That's why white and red just kind of suck, because we don't answer the ramping player. We don't really go after the ramping player as much as we maybe should. Instead, we try to emulate the ramping player and we just can't do it well enough. And so things like this are the way to do it. Oh, I love it. Thank you for playing with this space. I hope we get more cards like this. All right, let's transition into enchantments. Let's talk about Tectonic Reformation. 1 and a red for an enchantment. Each land you in your hand has cycling for a red. And this enchantment has cycling too. This is also getting up there. This is 42 cents, but let me tell you, this is worth it. All right. I want to talk about cycling lands and why I think they're way better than you believe and way worth the cost. All right. Cycling lands, and to some extent, scry lands, enter the battlefield tapped. That's undeniably not good. If you are playing underpowered cards in a budget deck, then you also don't want to be off curve as well, because then your slightly underpowered cards are maybe a turn late, and then their impact is shrunk even more. But the other thing is that you want to make sure that you have some resiliency against flooding out. Okay. And Tectonic Reformation is the best insurance plan I can see for flooding out, because you can basically turn every land into a cycling land, and cycling lands are very, very good. The reason why is because you are forced to play like 37 lands, and in many cases people cut too much. More than a third of your deck is lands, and although you need to hit those land drops after a certain point, it just doesn't work. You just don't want it. And so a lot of decks get past that with just raw card advantage. They'll draw enough cards that they'll draw through those spells of land, those groups of lands, into the relevant spells. You don't necessarily always have the cards to just draw you through those groups of lands, you know, and maybe you're not playing the card drawn red that can really get you there. Those Wheel of Fortunes that can just, well, I'll just draw 7 new cards, and even though 3 of them are lands, I can just ignore that because I'll have 4 relevant cards, you know? And so in colors like white and red, I think that cycling lands are super duper important because you can almost always find a way to deploy a tapped land. but then get rid of it and go for something better when you don't need it. I mean, I feel like it's super important in budget decks too, where you embrace the basic. You know, you put a ton of basics in your deck because your basics are good. If you can hit your colors correctly and you're not messing yourself up in colors, like it's an untapped land that casts the spells you need. It's great, you know? So embrace the basic, but then also, you know, find a way to get rid of excess basics or excess lands, like through cycling, you know, to really get the cards that you need. Card draw in the late game this is why the scry lands are so good too. Like if you can ever scry something to the bottom and get yourself to a more relevant card, that's just like adding draw card to your land. It's just so good. And if you have plenty of lands in your deck, then wouldn't you rather have your cards literally be a cantrip? It makes a huge difference. And Tectonic Reformation is truly a staple. I cannot imagine a red deck, specifically a mono red deck, where I wouldn't want this card. And the downside, it cycles too. This could theoretically just be 2 mana, throw it away, get something better. Does everything, is amazing. It's hard to see the impact of cycling. It's much easier to feel the impact. And the problem is that sometimes it feels different in different situations. It's very, very good though. All right. That was the only red enchantment. Red not having a lot of enchantments over here. But let's move on to some instants and sorceries. Increasing Vengeance. Red for an instant. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. If this spell was cast from your graveyard, copy the spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copy. Its flashback is a little bit more expensive. 3 red. This is coming in at 27 cents because of its reprint in Commander 2019. Good job, Commander 2019, with those reprints. I'm a big fan of Increasing Vengeance. In fact, I'm a big fan of copy spells. But hang on, this is not the best of copies, and you have to know that cards like Fork, the original copy spell, are $18 for a reason. Because the $18 version is ugly with a white border. Why did it take me? Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. This only copies a spell you control. Fork just copies any spell, and that is undeniably better. I'm sorry, it just is. The fact that you can, someone can go to counter your spell, and you can cast Fork, copying their counter spell to counter their counter spell in red, is great. The fact that they can cast a big time stretch or something like that, and you're like, oh, Fork your time stretch. See, Fork allows you to gain a mana advantage off of your opponent's spells. And Increasing Vengeance does not. It's not to say that Increasing Vengeance is bad, but you can't just deploy this on 2. You have to cast another spell and then cast Increasing Vengeance. And by the way, the flashback at 5 means that you need a ton of mana to be able to pull that off. So let's look at some of the copy spells. And let's go to red. Let's go to copy spell. And let's take a look at some of them. By the way, they're all going to be pricey. Bonus round. This is, again, only your... it's a sorcery, so it's really going to be your spells. And it's coming in at above $2. Dualcaster Mage is a pretty budget version, but it's topped $2 as well. And people were not thrilled about Dualcaster Mage. Fork, I already mentioned. Fury Storm. This is a solid one, and it missed my budget line a little bit. But I actually would totally recommend playing Fury Storm. It's hard to hold up 4 mana. It really is. But I've seen this cast and really have it be strong because it can copy a couple of times and it only has to copy twice to make it really, really powerful. But other copy effects are pretty, like Reverberate. This is a couple bucks. It's only $1.15. That's pretty good. Reverberate is pretty good. Copy target instant source spells. You may choose new targets for the copy. So Reverberate is very solid. Only $1. Wild Ricochet is solid too. Reiterate. Again, Reiterate got expensive. Yeah. $8. So some of these copy spells are a little bit expensive, and so increasing vengeance, getting that reprint equity, being a little bit clunky by only copying your own stuff, that limiting factor allowed it to be 27 cents. But I think you should embrace the copy effects and also add Fury Storm to this slightly bigger budget list. I'm a fan. Moving on, we have Thrill of Possibility. Red struggles with card draw, but instead, let's just have this simple effect. Discard a card, draw 2 cards, instant speed whenever you need it. It's easy. It's basically card filtering. You basically throw away a land and draw 2. It's pretty good. And at 9 cents, it's really strong. Also, you got this at 53 cents. Look at this version. I know that whenever I hover over it, it goes over my head. Look at this version for 50 cents. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, Release the Gremlins. Coming in at 17 cents. Destroy those artifacts, make 2/2s. Amazing. I talked about Buy Force in the other video, so I want to mention Buy Force. It is 30 cents. So if you want to be a little bit more spiky, a little bit more aggressive, you need to answer those artifacts earlier. Buy Force is played by competitive players. It's X and a red, destroy X target artifacts. Done. Just done. It's great. And the reason why we'd be looking at these effects is that the go-to of Vandal Blast is expensive. It's creeping up to $4 for this uncommon that's been reprinted in commander sets. Vandal Blast is 1 red to destroy target artifact you don't control, but it has an overload of 4 and a red to destroy all the artifacts you don't control. And it's undeniably good. This is kind of a very commander staple way of answering artifacts. But at $4, it's just, I don't know. I mean, maybe at 30 cents, this is better. I mean, how many artifacts are you really blowing up with Vandal Blast when you have the flexibility of in the early game going, no. I'll pay 3 mana and kill those 2 things that are important. Or later on in the game, you're like, no, I'll kill that, and that, and go after exactly what you need. Or for a little bit more mana, invest in some little 2/2s along with it, because the price drops in half again to 17 cents for Release the Gremlins. Moving on. We have Ignite the Future, the card draw spell in red that you should all be playing, and it should be more than 27 cents. Ignite the Future is 3 in a red. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until your next turn, you may play those cards. If the spell was cast from the graveyard, you may play this without paying their mana costs. Wow. So this is 4 mana, draw 3. That's Harmonize. That's Concentrate. That's a good rate. It stinks that you'll lose it. You only get it for 1 turn. So you play it for 4 and you're like, oh, okay, well, I've already paid 4 mana. I'm not going to be able to do much else this turn. Maybe play a land, but then you get it again your next turn as well. You get to keep going into your next turn and sort of plan it out. So this is not pure card draw, but in red, it might be as good as you can get. But that flashback is great. Later on in the game, you can just pay 8 and then suddenly you're casting those cards for free. You could just jump ahead. This one card could have you seeing multiple cards. One thing about, this is Fury Storm, I wanted to do Faithless Looting. Faithless Looting is good. It was expensive and then it was banned, so now it's down a little bit more. Hopefully being reprinted in Commander and Mystery Booster will even that out a little bit. But Faithless Looting was not card advantage, but we liked it because it had this sort of flashback access, and red just didn't have the ability to just red card draw kind of stinks. And so we played with what we had, and sometimes we could utilize the graveyard, the flashback, give us even more card selection. It was pretty good, even though it was a disadvantage. And then now let's look back at Ignite the Future, and yeah, it's more expensive. It's a little bit clunkier, but we might have more access to cards. Less graveyard synergy, maybe more access to cards, and the price is really, really worth it. All right, this is our last red card, and it is Reality Scramble. This is a powerful effect out of Commander 2018. Reality Scramble is 2 red for sorcery. Put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card that shares a card type with that permanent. Put that card on the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Retrace. Okay, so this reads, put a dumb thing on the bottom of your library and then hope you get something better. By the way, you can build your deck around this, and you're oftentimes like getting rid of a token and then getting a real card, a real creature out of it. I've seen people use this. Actually, this is a great card in that Planeswalker deck I just pulled up, where you can create a token from a Planeswalker and then kill the token, and then suddenly you're upgrading into a real creature. Sometimes you have a silly Planeswalker, a Tybalt, and you just cast it, and then suddenly you got a Jace coming up. It can be very, very strong, and the fact that you can turn excess lands into it, this retrace is just great. Let's compare it to some other effects. This is a polymorph style effect, and polymorph isn't really a good comparison because it's in blue, but it's still 4 mana, it's still 80 cents, and it only hits creatures, and it doesn't have retrace. This just feels better. Let's talk about creativity. It's indomitable creativity. This is probably more expensive because I've seen it used in Pioneer. Only 75 cents. I've seen this used in Pioneer, by the way, so you might want to think about getting it at 75 cents. This is X red. Destroy X target artifacts and or creatures. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards, and blah, 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 puts that card on the battlefield. So, yeah. I like this. Basically, you can pay 4, just like Reality Scramble, and get rid of something and then get something new. But I love how this one can be weaponized. Yeah, you can point it at someone else's big thing and say, no, you don't get that. You'll get anything else but that. If we look at transformation, divergent transformations, this is a similar effect coming in at $1.40. It's not going to cost 7 mana because it's going to cost 1 less for each opponent. So it's going to cost, you guessed it, 4 mana. Exile 2 target creatures, go looking for an upgrade or a downgrade. Okay. Again, all of these effects cost around 4, and some of them are over $1, but this one, is Reality Scramble is just cents. 31 cents. It's pretty good and has retrace. The only thing that it can't do is answer your opponent's creatures. And so I would actually take a look at a lot of these different cards. And if this wasn't a budget version, I might consider an Indomitable Creativity in a different deck. In fact, I'm probably gonna say, hey, buy this card in a different video because 73 cents is great. I love that you can weaponize it. And then Divergent Transformations. Still think this is a solid card. I love the fact that you can just be like, look, for 4 mana, I don't want any of this business over here. Exile that. I don't care what you get. You know what I mean? That's some of the randomness that people don't like, but it is essentially like almost a double Chaos Warp. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a double Chaos Warp. Chaos Warp oftentimes misses because they hit an instant or sorcery. It's only a permanent card that they get it, but Chaos Warp is a solid removal spell in our format. People are fine running it, and it's $2. I think that we should be just as fine running Divergent Transformations as creature removal or your own creature upgrade. So one of your creatures about to die? Sure, I'll upgrade that. I'll take out your biggest thing. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. All right. That has been red. Red is a little bit more limited than other colors, but I still think it has a strong showing, especially in the card advantage. People say, where's red's card advantage? Turn land, Reality Scramble says, turn lands into upgrading new creatures. Ignite Flames is just a solid 4 mana draw 3. Thrill of Possibility, instant speed, draw spells, start cycling your lands into draw with Tectonic Reformation. You have some more draw on Wildfire Devils, essentially. Casting spells for free is like draw. Tectonic Giant is like impulse draw. So really, like, we're trying to shore up the weaknesses of the color, and that's kind of what a staple is. It's like, well, how do we make this color run? And that's been the way to do it. All right, let's jump into green really quickly, and then we'll move on to multicolored and colorless. All right, everyone, let's talk about the green cards in this Build Your Collection database. Fierce Empath. You know, creature tutors are expensive. We look at stuff like, I don't know, like Worldly Tutor. Like do you know what I should do is just look up search. That's $18. I mean, I'm wondering what's the easiest tutor that we have in green. Search creature, you know, and what's the cheapest one? I'll show you a few others, but Birthing Pod is not cheap, $10. Court of Calling is not cheap, $7. Eldritch Evolution, this might be, nope, $3.50, just reprinted. Finale of Devastation, $14. Green Sun Zenith, $7. Like, where's the budget? Like, Natural Order, $16. Here's the budget, by the way. Moonvolley Beast Tracker coming in at 13 cents. This is your budget search along with the other one that I have. And by the way, this promo being 38 cents, mwah, so good. Okay, so this is also the tutoring that we really want. But then let's look at other stuff like Pattern of Rebirth. This was reprinted, but it's still, okay, maybe Pattern of Rebirth is a pickup right there. Protean Hulk, Survival of the Fittest is $1 bajillion. So many dollars. Summoner's Pact is money. Yep. So, I mean, like, I'm just clicking on all of these different cards. Wild Pear's your budget right there. Oh my gosh, it went over. I'm very upset that it's so high. Oh my gosh, I thought this was like cents, and it's now really expensive. Woodland Bellower used to be cheap too, and it's above $2. Okay, so you can see how Traverse the Ovenwald. People stopped playing that card. Come on. Got to jump through some hoops. $5. Tooth and Nail. I know that this isn't cheap. I'm just trying to prove a point here. $15. Where's Primal Command? Primal Command, I think, was reprinted a bunch of times. Where's Primal Command? Come on, Primal Command. There we go, $1.30. Let's look up Savage Summoning. That's another one. Savage Summoning? That's there. Oh, Shared Summons. All right, 99 cents for a promo version? Okay, we can do that. Why is the promo version cheaper than the other version? Doesn't matter. Oh, this is you need a new, so basically they did these printings of these promos and they just put a Planeswalker symbol on it. That's it. I think people are just so frustrated that there's like a new category just for this stupid stamp that they're like, I don't want this. 99 cents, get it off my table. But anyways, under $1 for shared summons too. So there's definitely a few of them that can let you search up creatures for pretty cheap. But I mean, is it really going to compare with our master, with Fierce Empath coming in at 40 cents? Okay, we have this little elf that comes into the battlefield and lets you search something big. And guess what? Something big is what you want. You want something to come on the battlefield and be big and make an impact and be able to curve into this. And so Fierce Empath is exactly what you want. It's a creature tutor. I know it's limited, but let's just have Moonvolley Beast Tracker in here too, and let's expand the budget reliability. You know, so often budget decks, they're not consistent, because a lot of decks build redundancy into them. When I'm building a deck and I'm like, look, I want to make sure that I have, you know, this effect in my deck, some card draw. I don't just put one card draw spell, I put a bunch. You know, I want to make sure to have this win condition. Well, I put ways to find it in there, or I put multiple win conditions in there. I put multiple effects. And a lot of times when you're on a budget, you don't have the budget to find all of those effects, you know? If you only have 2 good pieces of equipment in your budget range, then find something that finds the equipment. You know what I mean? If you only have a couple really good, solid, big creatures that you're proud of, that you've spent some money on, maybe only one Pathbreaker Ibex, and no Craterhoof Behemoth, then throw a Fierce Empath in there. It's really going to impact the game, and Fierce Empath can get some win conditions that are coming on later on in here. Springbloom Druid. Okay. Not only is this a Jumbo Commander preview card, high five Springbloom Druid, 2 glowing hand 5s. This is also just solid ramp. It's great. It's Harrow on a dude. If we look at some of the other ones, like Wood Elves. Wood Elves is very good, by the way. I think that this is one of the best versions of the Mana Dork that gets a thing. It's coming in at $1. That's a lot. Okay, but remember, it gets a forest card and puts it on the battlefield untapped. So you can fix with Wood Elves, and it comes in untapped. That's really good. Okay. This doesn't really do that. You have to get basic lands. You know what I mean? So yeah, Wood Elves is better, but it's also 5 times as expensive. So that's the difference. And so I think Springbloom Druid belongs in tons of decks. Like, it really, really is a staple when it comes to creature-based ramp. And yeah, you might like the way Wood Elves plays a little bit better, but Springbloom Druid could arguably be better in a lot of different decks. Definitely better in a Gitrog monster deck, or a Lord Windgrace deck, or a Muldrotha deck, or tons of them. This is undeniably a staple, and I'm so happy it's at 20 cents, and I'm so happy I was the one that got to spoil that card out of Modern Horizons. Arasta of the Endless Web. This is 37 cents, and it's 2 green. I didn't read Springbloom Druid. Moving past it, you should know what it is, because you listen to DJ and the Jumbo Commander. Arasta the Endless Web. 2 green for a legendary enchantment creature spider. It's got reach like spiders do, because they've got webs, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. It's a 3/5. So, people argue that they're just not going to cast their instants or sorceries. That you're just going to end up with a 3/5 for 4, and that does nothing in Commander. And that's true. It doesn't do very much in Commander. But do you know how I know that they will continue to cast their spells? I would like to point out the presence of Mystic Remora. Mystic Remora is a crazy good card. Whenever an opponent plays a non-creature spell, you may draw a card unless that player plays 4. No one pays 4, okay? And also, people don't stop playing their cards. They just play it into Mystic Remora. They're like, sure, draw a card. You just have to. Draw a card. Draw a card. You know what I mean? I also know about Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is something that people always just like, I don't pay the 1. I don't pay the 1, draw a card. So a card is better than a 1/2 spider. Just getting that out there. Card is better than a 1/2 spider. This is not Rhystic Study. This is not Mystic Remora. But these are case studies for the fact that people will really let you draw cards, this big downside, just so that they could play their Magic. A 1/2? Yeah, they're just going to let you create as many 1/2s as you want, and they're going to play Magic. And you're going to end up with a ton of 1/2s. How many 1/2s do you need before this card is insane? 4 mana, 3/5 reach with 3 1/2s with reach? That's crazy. That's a 6/11 across 4 bodies, all with reach for 4 mana. That's gonna happen. People are going to play so many spells. You're going to make so many spiders, and they are annoying as hell. They're impossible to get through. You're going to just make a huge army, and then you're going to weaponize these tiny things with other effects in green. This card it's very good. The downside is it's going to get caught up in enchantment removal. People are going to play a Knight of Autumn, and they're going to be like, get that thing. Or a Crush Contraband. They're going to be like, all right, get that thing too. Because it is a juicy enchantment target. But for the most part, this is one of the better cards out there for 37 cents. You need to play it and see how many stupid spiders you get, and it's going to be a lot. All right. This is another card that people, they look at the worst case scenario instead of the average case scenario, I feel. This is called Voice of Many. It's out of Commander 2019 and it's 10 cents. Voice of Many is 2 green for an elf druid and it's a 3/3. When Voice of Many enters the battlefield, draw a card for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. Okay, so if this is your only creature entering the battlefield and everyone else has a creature out, then this is a 4-mana 3/3. That is very bad. Okay, so the worst case scenario is that this is bad. It draws you no cards. But just imagine if it draws you 1 card. Suddenly, this is fine. Not great, but fine. And then if this draws you 2 cards, then it's amazing. Then it's a staple in every green deck. So basically, you go from the worst case scenario is scary. You don't want that. But then you move to your average case scenario, and this card is almost a staple in every deck. And then your best case scenario, you're playing against 3 other people, and this is a 4-mana draw. This is harmonized with a 3/3 body? It's insane, And this is instantly an expensive card that you just need in every deck. Voice of Many is good. And honestly, what I love about this card is that the more competitive decks that you're playing against, the better Voice of Many is. A lot of competitive decks lean really heavily on spells and have shied away from creatures in Commander because creatures are too easy to kill. They're board wipes everywhere. And so people are really only playing the most impactful creatures or creatures that have redundant value on them or, stuff like that. Just a dumb, attacking creature doesn't really make it into decks anymore. And so Voice of Many could draw you 3 cards often, and you're in a green deck. Come on, you're going to be playing elves and ramping this out. If you play an elf and ramp this out, who's going to have more creatures than you? No one. You're going to instantly refill your hand and draw 3. This is staple, and this is 10 cents. Awesome. Awesome. I don't think I have to talk much about Acidic Slime. 3 green for a 2/2 death touch. When Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. This is the definition of a 3-for-1. Okay. It enters the battlefield and you get to kill something. That's great. Okay. You get a 2/2. That's usually, by the way, I said 3-for-1. This is not a 3-for-1. It's more of like a 2-for-1. A lot of times, the body in Commander doesn't matter. Like I make an argument that Mole Drifter is, everyone puts it up on a pedestal or, I'm sorry, I'm blanking here. 1 green, gets something, 2/1 gets Eternal Witness. There we go. People put Eternal Witness and Mole Drifter and these creatures that have this good enter the battlefield effect up on a pedestal. And I say, look, you need to use the body in order for this effect to be really good. Like, you need to want a 2/2 for Mole Drifter to be really good. It's fine. It's a fine, good card on its own. But in order for it to reach this staple level, to reach this pinnacle that we've pushed it up to, you need to use the body. You need to flicker it. You need to reanimate it. You need to equip it. You need to do something with it. Same thing goes for Eternal Witness. We're going to talk about some green return effects, like for example, just regrowth. Regrowth is cheaper and it works really well, and it might be better than Eternal Witness if you're not using that body. And so you might wonder, well, how good is a 2/2 body? Why isn't this Rain of Thorns instead? Rain of Thorns, Rain of Thorns? I should just type in Thorns. I wish Cavalier of Thorns was cheap, but it's not. $8, get out of here. Rain of Thorns. Oh my gosh, I got it right, except for it's expensive. Like, not expensive price-wise, expensive 6 mana. Rain of Thorns says choose 1 or more, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. And you could choose all 3. So this could get, this is a 3-for-1. For 9 cents, dude, let's try out Rain of Thorns. Let's play this in some decks. That's like some decimate action right there. Which used to be budget and I think is over $1 now. Yep. Anyways. Rain of Thorns is definitely some good damage right there. But hang on. So you're like, if Rain of Thorns costs 1 more than Acidic Slime and gets 3 things, why am I playing Acidic Slime? Well, it's because of that body, but this body is more relevant because it has death touch. Okay, it's gonna trade for another creature. It's gonna lock down the game. It's gonna give you some defenses. I think that this is better than a lot of other creatures out there. And even though I'm a little bit sad, I didn't put Reign of Thorns on my list of staples. You get to know about it because you've slogged through like 2 hours of show right now of me rambling. Deep Forest Hermit. This is going to be easy too. 32 cents, 3 green for an elf druid with vanishing 3. When it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Squirrels you control get +1/+1. This is 9 power and toughness across 5 bodies for 5 mana. That's it. Yeah, it's going to vanish, but you're going to wait you're going to make an impact during these turns. Like Hermit Druid. I mean, I know that Hermit Druid is suffering from the problem of reprintability. You can't reprint this Hermit Druid, so that's why it's $11 because it's on the reserved list right here. Okay, so excuse me. That's why you can't reprint it. That's why it's $11. Not because of the effect, but it's still good. People played Hermit Druid in competitive decks a long time ago, but this was in cubes. Like, this is a big impact on the board. 5 bodies is great. And Deep Forest Hermit is arguably an upgrade for 32 cents. I mean, when you're talking about this number of bodies at this mana cost, like, I mean, maybe we're talking about Hornet Queen, but Hornet Queen used to be budget and isn't budget anymore. It's over $1. Actually, it used to only be printed in Commander, and so this was a really expensive card. And then luckily it was reprinted in Commander 2015. But this is over $1 for this and 7 mana, you know? And this is only 6 power and toughness. Don't get me wrong, Hornet Queen is great, but come on, Deep Forest Hermit. I also want to mention one other thing that was not on the list, and I'm sad that it wasn't because it's cheap as well, and that's Ant Queen. Ant Queen coming in at 43 cents. I was looking at it and I was like, is it 43 cent worth? But now that I'm thinking back, I think that it might be. Ant Queen is 5 mana for a 5/5 solid and 1 and a green. Create an insect. Boom. This is a really big effect when you could just start dumping mana into creating huge, super duper armies. And by the way, look at this gross Ant Queen art for only 75 cents. Look at this. Ugh. It's from 2009 too. It's from over a decade ago. So you get a decade old promo. Yeah, there's a lot of them in the world, but for 75 cents, go and get this cool Ant Queen. It's dumb. And whenever you have an ability to go wide and really impact the board, it's going to be good. This stuff combines really well with go big effects with like overwhelming stampede or end raise forerunners, stuff like that. Green goes wide really well. I say the green goes wide really well when I talk about something that lets you go tall. Aggressive Mammoth is 3 green for this 28 cent elephant. An elephant. I do love them. 3 green, 8/8 elephant, 8/8 for 6. Thumbs up. Trample. Gets searched up by Moonvolley Beast Caller or the other tracker person. Okay. Other creatures you control have trample. That could be very valuable. There's a lot of big dumb greens out there that don't have trample, that they specifically don't put trample on it. Like this Beanstalk Giant. You know, another card that almost made the list, but I talked about a little bit too much, but should have, because look at this art for 26 cents. I love when you can get beautiful, sorry, my face is covering it up. I love when you can get beautiful promo art for cheap. This is awesome, 26 cents, but it doesn't have trample. Give it trample. There's some other big creatures out here. I was looking for Gigantosaurus. Because not giant, Gigantosaurus. There we go. This is not a card that you should get because it's too expensive for what it is, but it's an example of how they undercost big things because they don't have trample. You know, it's 5 mana for a 10/10. That's crazy. But suddenly you can make it a 10/10 trample You know what I mean? Or play this Beanstalk Giant and give it trample, and it's a threat. People die. So this is kind of a combo that you can embrace, something that could be really strong. Krosan and Tusker is not really a 6/5. This is the green divination, and that's how you should play it. 5 green for a 6/5 creature, whatever. But really the thing is cycling 2 and a green, discard this card to draw a card, and when you do, search your library for a basic land card and put it into your hand. 3 mana, uncounterable, draw 2, oops, 1's a land. But it actually fixes, like you get the basic land you want. In green, it's amazing. Like I would always play divination in green. This is very good. And then you end up with a creature in your graveyard. Like you can get this back. Like creatures in your graveyard are oftentimes more flexible than other cards. Play the green divination. This is 1 cent, 1 cent. Is this even, what is this? I need to, this is from Modern Horizons. I have the 7 cent version. I don't even have the 5 cent version on my list. I need to get the 1 cent version on my list. We're going to do that. Should we do that right now? No, we're not going to do that right now. 1 cent. You're never going to find, you might just find this in bulk, you know, for free off of your friends, but no one's going to send this to you for 1 cent. I don't know, maybe someone. Endray's Forerunners. This is not a Craterhoof Behemoth, but let's read it anyways. 5 green for a 7/7 boar with vigilance, trample, and haste. When Endray's Forerunners enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2, gain vigilance and trample until end of turn. Okay. Everywhere we're trying to imitate Craterhoof Behemoth, and it's not. But is it that much worse? Let's look up Craterhoof. Craterhoof is better, but is it 38.55? Is it 38.55 better? No, it's not. No one should be paying 38.55. Just Endray's Forerunners, people. Or Decimator of Provinces. Another +2/+2 in trample. This is coming in at $2. Pathbreaker Ibex used to be good. Now it's not. Makes me sad. This is probably $4. Ugh, $8. Okay. This used to be budget. I would take this $8 is on the edge, but $38. But let's just compare it. Okay. This is a 7/7. Gives everything +2/+2, vigilance and trample. This has trample and haste itself. Remember that Moon Volley Beast Tracker? Beast, I don't know if that's going to work. Element. Remember this guy? Remember this one right here that I told you to get and get the promo one for 38 cents? This searches up creatures with Death Touch, Hexproof, Reach, or Trample. So this can actually get the Endray's Forerunners. It cannot get Craterhoof. Craterhoof triggers and gives itself trample, but it does not itself have trample. So Moon Volley Beast Tracker can get, Endray's Forerunners. It can get, this aggressive mammoth. It can get, can it get the same thing with Reach? Oh my gosh, it can. Look at this. The synergies going on. It can get this acidic slime. Just amazing. Okay, so Endray's Forerunners is the value card we need. I also wanted to see if the new card, it's green, it gives +3/+3. It's a creature. Let's see if we can come up with it. I think it's expensive. This Earthshaker Giant, I really hoped the price went down. It didn't really go down enough. It's $5 still. I really hope that this gets down to $3 and that people can start running this Earthshaker Giant as well. Again, fetchable. It just gives everything +3/+3. It's pretty good. Okay, but you need this effect to close out a game. Okay, I talked about Ant Queen. I talked about some other stuff. Verdant Force is that similar effect. 24 cents. 5 green for a 7/7 at the beginning of each upkeep. Create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. So this helps you go wide because in multiplayer, this will get you 4 sapperlings every time you come around. So many other creatures will just say, oh, we'll give you a sapperling at the beginning of your turn. No, Verdant Force is like, you get 4, you get 4, you get 4. And that's enough to take over a game. It's very good, and especially good when you combine it with Endray's Forerunners. I don't think that's a surprising thing that Verdant Force can take over a game if unchecked, especially if you have the ways to use the tokens, abuse them. Okay, Fertile Ground, coming in at 14 cents. It's an aura enchantment for 1 and a green. Enchant land. When enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. This is ramp for 2. Ramp is not something that's incredibly expensive, but when you're talking about like the classic ramp of Farseek, you're still talking about close to $1. You got 84 cents. It's not cheap, especially when you compare it to 14 cents. Maybe you have both of them in your deck. Who knows? Maybe you like the green pip for devotion. Maybe you like the fact that it's an aura. You have an Eidolon of Blossoms and you're going to draw a card. But mainly we just might be looking for 2 mana ramp. As soon as you leave Farseek, you have Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth is going to be cheap as well. Really solid common that's been reprinted a bunch. Still 38 cents, But the thing is that we run out of them. People start looking at stuff like literally people play in competitive formats, or when they're really stretching, people play 3 visits. People play this card. Not a lot, because it's $67 for a sorcery for 2 that lets you get a forest card and put it on the battlefield. But people play it. Okay. Fertile Ground. It's a good card. You might want 2 mana ramp instead of 3 mana ramp. Cultivating Kanama's Reach is not that much more. They've both seen drops in prices. They're both over $1. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip Kenrith's Transformation and go down here to Wolfwillow Haven, because we're seeing a return to an enchantment aura that will give us more mana, and it's great. Wolfwillow Haven is 1 and a green for an enchantment aura. Enchant land. When the enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. Yes. Give us more mana. This is great. It's 11 cents. By the way, you can cash it in for a wolf later. I'll take a wolf, sure. An overcosted wolf, fine. Later on in the game, I will gladly sacrifice this to create a wolf. And by the way, I like the art too. Look at this, like these wolves kind of hiding in this haven. I love it. And it's the ramp we need. And look at this 51-cent promo version right there for the buying at 51 cents. Okay. Both of these in the same category. Let's talk about another aura for 1 and a green. At 13 cents, we have Kenrith's Transformation. 1 and a green or enchantment. Enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. Let's take a look at Beast Within. Beast Within. Oh, I searched Beast again and it's 58 cards. This is over $1, and it's been reprinted a bunch of times, including in the Mystery Booster, included in Commander 19, included in Battle Bond, but it's $1.50. Now, this hits a permanent, but how often are we answering creatures? Like, we answer creatures a lot. And green is very good at taking out artifacts and enchantments. Not so good at, it can take out creatures, but it fights them. You know what I mean? So Beast Within is super flexible, but Kenrith's Transformation is 13 cents. And you draw a card! This replaces itself. I would play this just to be able to cycle it. Just the ability to just be like, I'll put this on my own creature and just be able to cycle through my deck. This is a staple. 100%. A lot of times the only way to answer commanders is to keep them on the battlefield. If you ever destroy them, send them to the graveyard, back to their hand, into their library, they're going to end up back in the command zone and they're going to do something bad again. When someone has a Maelstrom Wanderer that they want to cast over and over again, or a critical commander that they need on the battlefield for their deck to run, turn it into an elk. Just take 3 every turn. Chump block it. Who knows? But this is a great way to have an answer for problematic cards. All right. Last enchantment, and then we're almost done with green, almost done with today's video, even though there's more. Frontier Siege, 3 and a green for an enchantment. As Frontier Siege enters the battlefield, choose Khans or Dragons. You have to choose one or the other. I like Khans the best. Khan says at the beginning of each of your main phases, add green, green. Wait, free green, green? At both of your main phases? So this is a 4-mana enchantment that ramps you 4? Yeah! Dragons is okay too. Whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight a target creature you don't control. So yeah, if you happen to have a flyer and you need this as like a really, really clunky, awkward removal spell, fine. But just the influx of mana is great. You know, oftentimes we search, we look for, we go for 4 mana ramp. You know what I mean? Like Skyshod Claim is great. You know, Skyshod Claim is great, and it's coming in at $1, and we play it a lot. 4 mana, get 2 lands. This is 4 mana, get 2 mana twice. This is kind of like having access to 4 lands during your turn if you can use the mana. Now, I know that lands on the battlefield is better than enchantment, but this can give you a boost, and 40 cents is great. And it has incidental flexibility with killing creatures. Solid stuff. Let's talk about let's talk about one sorcery spell before we wrap up green, and that's Winding Way. 1 and a green for a sorcery, choose creature or land, reveal the top 4 cards, put all the cards of the chosen type revealed this way into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. So this is not good in a deck where you don't have a critical mass of creatures. But it's not even that bad because you know that your deck is 40% lands. It's close to 50%, you know? But if it's 40% lands, like you're gonna draw a card off of this, right? You might even draw 2 cards. You might even draw 3 cards. You know, that's happened before. And honestly, this digs you for what you need. If you need lands, if you just need them, you say lands, you're gonna get 1. You might get a couple. You know, 2 mana draw 2, even if they're lands in green, thumbs up. Okay. Now, if you're just going after playables, like you need your creatures, you know, hopefully you're running 30 creatures in a deck like this. You play it, and odds are you're going to get 1. Okay. You might even get 2, and then you basically have gone 2 mana, draw 2 relevant, important cards when you need it. When you need lands, you get the lands. When you need creatures, you get the creatures. This is cheap. The other ones end up in your graveyard. You like things in your graveyard because you're in green. You can recur them. There's synergy. Yes. In all forms, yes. Winding Way is great. I could have sworn that I added that green card with addendum on it. Did I not do that? I did do it. Where's Once in Future? Why is Once in Future not on my list? I screwed that up probably. Once in Future is a card that I named because this is 7 cents. Once in Future is 3 and a green for an instant. Instant's awesome too. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Put up to 1 other target card from your graveyard on top of your library. Exile Once in Future. If you spent at least 3 green to cast this spell, then you just get both of them back. So this is a good version of recursion that I'm actually been very, very happy with. If we look at other cards like just Regrowth, it's a solid, spelled that right. It's just a solid card that's come down in price a lot, 27 cents. Return a card from your graveyard to your hand. That's fine. That's great. But sometimes in Magic, you don't care about the low cost. You care about just the raw power. And also this being an instant means that you have the flexibility to play it when you need to play it. I like that. I love the instance on this. Because if we look at anything else, Wildest Dreams, again, cheap, 28 cents. You can get a bunch of cards back, but this is sorcery speed. And in order to get 2 cards back, you're paying 5 mana. 4 mana. Instant speed. Wildest Dreams has a higher upside of being able to just get a bunch of cards back. But come on, I just really like this. Okay. There's also, they've been toying a lot about with green in getting permanents back. You know, some of the Nissas do it as well. If you're looking for something a little bit more expensive, but you want a card that I think is phenomenal and is cheaper than other Planeswalkers at $388. If you've got $5 lying around and you have a green deck, please get Nissa Vital Force. She is very good, and this is a good price. Even like, this is $70. Oh my gosh. Anyways, $388. Kaladesh, amazing. This does return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. They've been messing around with this permanent, and I really like that you can get anything with some of these others. You should still buy Nissa Vital Force. It's really great. But the fact that Once in Future gets any card, and you can get 2 of them back to your hand, you might even be able to play with some shenanigans of playing with the top of your library. I've been a big fan. Also, this art, by the way. Let's look at this art for a second. I love it. The colors are great. This sort of vision, this little kid. It's got a dog in it. Come on. Buy Once in Future. 7 cents. All right, everyone. Not only did we finish this, we're not done, actually. We have more. We have more to go. But we finished this particular video. Now, look. I know that this is not going to be a big hit. We're going to have tens of thousands of people watching this video because it's in depth. It's got a lot of meat to it, you know? So I know that the people that really care are the only ones that are going to watch this. But the reason why I can make these kinds of videos is because I have support of Cool Stuff Inc. and I have support of my patrons. They really allow me to do videos that I know people aren't going to watch because I think that there are people out there that do get a lot of value out of it. And I like going on these deep dives. I like rambling about stuff. And I don't care that, you know, this won't make me money or won't, you know, grow my channel because hopefully people will find value in it. And from the comments of the first video, some of you do. So thank you for supporting me. Thank you for sharing videos like this. And thank you to Cool Stuff Inc. If you check out their store, Jumbo 5 gets you 5% off some of these amazingly inexpensive cards. So check them out. And then thank you to my patrons because they give me the flexibility financially to like not always have to think about what's gonna get the most views, what's gonna push the channel forward. Instead, it's like, well, how can I help people think about these cards? Like, how can I, you know, explore this area, or what can I do what I want? So thank you so much, patrons, from the bottom of my heart. And thank you for sticking with me to the end. This has been long and there's more coming. All right, everyone, please let me know in the comments that you like this, or else, I don't know, or else it's a lot of work and I won't talk for forever to do these anymore. Okay. I love you all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.